Hey, the world's full of fantastic music. Each month, we explore an album of significance, its roots, how it makes us feel, and then banter about its influence and staying power. Join us on our journey as we dissect, discuss, and discover some of the world's greatest albums on The Sonic Collective.
Hey everyone, thanks for tuning in to the Sonic Collective. This is Alan, and I am here with Darren, Scott Coates, and Scott Gregory. And this is round number 4 of our little theme of finding commonalities between 3 albums. And this was the pick for December 2022, and it was my pick. Of course, I chose the albums Human by 3 Days Grace, A Trick of the Tail by Genesis, and The Real Thing by Faith No More. And so we are going to give a quick review of each, and then we will try and take a stab at what each of these albums had in common. It sounds like I didn't do a very good job of finding something obscure this time. So if you're listening along with us, maybe you have uncovered it too. Let me throw it right over to Scott Coates here.
All right. Thanks very much, Alan. This was a good one. You know, one of the 3 I knew really well. 3 Days Grace, I know of the name, and I think there's a song or 2 I know by them, but I can't name what it is. And Genesis, you know, I know some of the later Genesis pop hits of the 80s, but I'd never listened to an older Genesis album. But this older one is still their 7th album. I was surprised when we learned. And then Faith No More, The Real Thing. I beat the living crap out of that cassette as a kid. I remember mowing the lawn in Lake Ponte Vista to that and loved it. So just some impressions of all 3. I'm sorry, Alan, but you know, 3 Days Grace, I just don't like new metal, and I really don't like Linkin Park, and I've never been able to figure it out because I like rap, I like hard rock, I like Rage Against the Machine, but anything that kind of sounds like new metal or reminds me of Linkin Park, I just can't deal with. And I tried this album a couple times, and it was just agony trying to get through it. Like Painkiller's all right, Car Crash, I kind of like the story, but I just, yeah, I just can't get into it. And you know, I find that Adam Gontier, I'm probably saying his name wrong, his voice is just so much the same as so many bands of that period. And I think that's what really left not many bands of this kind of style sticking out a decade or 2 later. So, yeah, this one really didn't do a whole lot for me. Genesis, A Trick of the Tail, you know, I kind of enjoyed it just to, you know, dive into the British prog rock rabbit hole, you know, and Dance Like a Volcano is a nice opener, kind of put me in the mood and the vibe. I don't know how you say it, but I think Spunk was kind of neat. Strangely, the title track is my least favorite on it. I found they kind of were similar, these tracks, a bit, but it was pretty interesting to imagine Collins, who I've only known as a lead singer in my life, that actually, you know, they auditioned a bajillion people and then sort of went with the drummer in the end, and what an evolution for him. So I think after this, I'm going to start listening to some Emerson, Lake and Palmer and ELO and King Crimson and yes, Alan Parsons. So I'm kind of interested. I haven't really done that progressive. Faith No More, as I mentioned, I know this really well. Haven't listened to this album in quite a while though, and I found it still stood up pretty well. The tracks flow really well. And you know, I guess one of the things I liked about all these is you can see all of them are albums, right? They all still come from that genre where the tracks are definitely picked in an order and they flow from start to finish. I think this one is still a standout from the 90s. The only thing I wonder about this is why did they put War Pigs, a cover on it? Because generally bands will throw in covers when they don't have enough original material, right? Like Van Halen did it on Diver Down, one of my favorite bands, and you're sort of like, but like they had enough material here. So I kind of wondered, like, why did they do War Pigs? Because it didn't really bring anything new to it. But I really love the Face No More. Love that album. Fantastic. Genesis, enjoyed it. I don't know how often I'll go back to it, but really enjoyed just the experience of something new. And 3 Days Grace kind of fell flat for me. Thanks, Alan.
Cool. Darren, what did you think?
Yeah, I shared some of Scott's thoughts and then some not so much. I'll start with Genesis. I didn't know about them earlier before, but I can't say I really got into them. I watched a documentary on some early British bands and things like that, and they really got into the Peter Gabriel era of Genesis, and they did some freaky, weird stuff back then. They were really alternative and really freaky. To me, who was raised in the '80s, and really that was like the pop era of Genesis. To go back and go like, wow, that's where they came from, because it's nothing like the music that you heard later in their career. And this album, I can almost see the start of it. I think it probably had a little more pop sensibility than some of the earlier Peter Gabriel stuff. But I encourage the listeners to go out there and like just Google and YouTube and watch some of the early stuff, and they'll be like, they would dress in women's clothes. Peter Gabriel would have like a wolf's mask on and just be doing like crazy shit on stage. So that being said, I'm not a huge prog rock fan. Scott, you mentioned some of the other bands like Alan Parsons, Emerson, Lake and Palmer. I actually like them a little more, but I still struggle with them a bit besides some of their hits and mainstream stuff. So it took me a while to get into it, but I mean, I appreciated who it was. And I think Phil Collins did do a good job in there. I also liked that song. Sorry, what was it again? Spronk? What was it called? Spadonk, Spronk, Squonk. It was Squonk. Squonk. Yeah, it was way off. Yeah. And a few others were good. The Robbery one. It was interesting, too, because there's only 8 songs in the album, and it comes in at, I think, 44 minutes or something like that. And the shortest song, I think, was the title track, and it's like 4 minutes, 34 seconds. But all the rest of them are like 6, 7, 8 minutes. Like, very proggy, long, composed songs. Like I said, a little more pop in there, but pretty mellow. But, didn't mind it. Just not my exact jam, I would say. But moving on to 3 Days Grace. I mean, I did know them. I mean, Scott, you're over in Thailand. You're probably not exposed to them as much. But here in Canada, we have a Canadian content rule where you have to play so much Canadian content, which is a good thing. And it promotes a lot of Canadian bands, which 3 Days Grace is. And I remember I listened to X92.9, a local alt rock station here. And they play them quite a bit. So I was quite familiar with Painkiller and some of the other hits on there. And what was the other? Oh, I Am Machine. Is that right? Yeah, that was a big hit for them on that one. And it's interesting. This one is 12 songs and 39 minutes. So now really short songs, like completely switching. Now, some of the newer rock, I'm with Scott a little bit. I struggle with. I mean, we already had an episode. Go back and listen to it, like for the most hated bands or something like that. I can't remember the name of that episode. And we covered Nickelback. And I mean, that's kind of the newer rock and things like that. Now, these guys aren't quite a Nickelback, but it is tagging on. I'd say they're a little heavier than that. I didn't get the real Linkin Park association like you did, Scott. Linkin Park, I don't mind some of their stuff, but I agree they were a little cheesy. But I didn't quite sense it like that. And this album, more than any of them, I think that I listened to in this series, this one grew on me. As the more I listened to it, the more I actually got into it a bit more. Yeah, it is some modern rock. It's a little more contemporary. Again, talking about pop sensibilities, there's a little bit more of that in there. It's not over the top heavy, but it's just heavy enough. Yeah, I kind of liked it, and didn't mind that one. And that one surprised me because I knew the hits, but I can't say I'd ever really sat and listened to a 3 Days Grace album. So I appreciated that. Faith No More. Now this one was interesting for me because, like Scott, I remember in my youth loving this album and being into it, and they were huge back then. I mean, this came out in '89. I would have been 19 at the time, and then I moved to Alberta when I was 20 and started bartending, and I remember them playing this. I worked in a live music bar that did a lot of rock, and they got played there all the time. And I remember loving it and listening to this. But you know what? To me, it's falling in the category that I don't think it aged well. And secondary, and I talked to Scott Coates while he was visiting in town here from Thailand recently, and I said to him, like, you know what? All I could get was, this is a direct ripoff of the Red Hot Chili Peppers. Like, once I got that in my head, I couldn't get it out. I'm like, they're just ripping off the Chili Peppers. It like almost sounds like them. And not that that's a bad thing. Derivative bands, and it's basically pop music, very trendy pop music. That's what they do. They're just derivative of each other and just play what pleases the ears. And I hate to say it, but for me, Faith No More kind of came off that way going back now 30 years later. And, yes, epic, and a lot of the songs I still got a kick out of them. They're okay, but it just I don't think it aged well for me. It's just not one of those albums I go back to and like, wow, it really stood the test of time, and these songs are so different and mind blowing. No, it kind of just fell back into that, and that's okay. You know, some popular music just stays there and it's good and it had its place in time, but that's where it was for me. But really good picks, Alan, really interesting. And the spread apart from them, I think we've even alluded to, I think we're going to get the connection, but it doesn't matter if it was a bit easier. It's a cool one. And anyway, let's sort of Scott Gregory. What do you think of these three?
Yeah, hey, thanks. So Genesis, Trick of the Tail, that's almost a tongue twister. Even though it is the first album that Phil Collins sings on, like you, Darren, I grew up in the 80s and 90s. So for me, I don't automatically compare this to like Peter Gabriel going backwards. I think more of like the albums of Invisible Touch and We Can't Dance, and they're more poppy versions in the 80s and 90s, right? That's what immediately comes to mind to me. And honestly, it doesn't appeal to me as much as those. I think Genesis did do their best work in the 80s and 90s. But you look at top Genesis song lists, and they're peppered with entries from their 70s work, both by Gabriel and Collins. So, mileage may vary on opinions on that. But I think that speaks to their strength as a band, that they were able to remain relevant and change artistically over time. And it's just that this album wasn't made for me. For me, most of the tracks have like a Sgt. Pepper's feel to them as far as the instrumentation and the vocal stylings. Which is fine in its place, but considering Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Heart Band came out like 8 years prior, this album just feels like a safe throwback as opposed to like a full departure into a new Genesis era. And that full Genesis doesn't happen for me until 93's album Genesis. Thank you. If I had to pick a favorite track, I'd say Los Endos. I enjoy when bands put instrumentals on their albums, and this one really shows off Phil Collins' drumming skills, which I think get lost over time by his role as the lead singer. Phil does still like playing drums whenever he can in concert, and I like it when he does too. He's very talented. But as far as this album goes, as the kids would say, it was mid. Faith No More, the real thing. So, yeah, this is the first album featuring Mike Patton instead of Chuck Mosley, who apparently did have beef with the Red Hot Chili Peppers, as I read, which I didn't know, which is quite interesting. Again, I'm a child of the 80s. This album came out just at the right time to catch my attention on the radio, mostly powered by the popularity of Epic. I never really did get into the album, though, which surprises me, because apparently there were like 5 singles that were released off of it. I really only recognized Epic and Falling to Pieces, and then obviously the War Pigs cover, which is great. Mike Patton has just the right tone and range to do that song some justice. I agree it's a little weird for it to be there. They do have so much material, but
I thought it was a good job, but they didn't make it their own. It just sounded like a direct ripoff. It's obviously modern mastering, but it just sounded like they didn't really do anything to it, which I found weird.
Yeah, like his voice sounds really close to Ozzy in a lot of ways, right? As far as it's almost a direct translation of the original. So, it's not a Miley Cyrus rendition of Metallica or anything by any way, shape, or form. I was pleasantly surprised how much I enjoyed it. There's groovy bass lines on here, hard-hitting punk vocals, and just 11 tracks, right? It was just the right amount of time. I didn't listen to it a huge amount as a kid, like I said, the album itself. So I came in without that expectation of, a youth spent listening to it. And I do think it holds up fairly well in context of the generation. I don't know if you could release any of it today, though, with that being said. So out of the 3 albums, this is the one that I listen to the most. And if I had to pick favorite songs, I'd probably say Woodpecker from Mars, which is another great instrumental track. And then Edge of the World is just a really nice, sultry number to close out on. I don't know what they were thinking there, but they were thinking right. I did not save the best for last. 3 Days Grace, Human. Dear God, Alan, why did you do this to me? Once again, I officially disavow all Nickelback and Nickelback adjacent bands. From Wikipedia, though, this band does have 17 number one songs on the Billboard Hot Mainstream Pop or Rock tracks, and three number ones on the alternative songs. So some people might think that's a good thing. To me, it just shows the formula's working. This is the first album without Adam Gontier, replaced by Matt Walsh, formerly of My Darkest Days, a band discovered by, surprise, surprise, Chad Kroeger. While the band's best work happened on earlier albums with tracks like I Hate Everything About You and Animal I Have Become, if you enjoyed them, you'll still love this very derivative offering. They splash a little Linkin Park on top this time, so get in there. So reining it in a bit, everything on the album is fine. The drumming is fine. The power chords are powerful. The screamy vocals have just the right amount of angst and anger as appropriate. And there are slow moments, and then things get super loud, and you can jump around for the chorus, which are all things Alan loves, I'm sure. 20-year-old me would have gone to a 3 Days Grace concert if I'd won the tickets on CJ92, and I would have surfed around some. I would have kicked some people in the head, and they would have tried to punch me in the nuts. But this album dropped for 40-year-old me, and my combat boots were collecting dust in the basement, and I couldn't sit in a chair and listen to this more than a couple times. It just hurt. So, if I had to pick a favorite song, I'd say it's a tie between One Too Many, which is the shortest song on the album, and that track with the really shouty vocals and overly aggressive power chords.
Oh, that one?
Yeah, that one. Yeah. And that's me. Back to you, Alan. What did you think?
Thanks, guys. Okay, I just want to preface this by stating I have never listened to an album from any of these bands before.
Wow.
I'll get into why I chose them later. But I'll start with my least favorite, and it'll be 3 Days Grace.
What?
I don't think you guys are wrong at all. I was really disappointed with this album. I thought I was going to like it, because anytime I've heard a 3 Days Grace single on the radio, it's usually been, a decent little tune. But yeah, I've never explored any of their albums in full, and I really couldn't get into this one at all. I think for me, the biggest barrier to entry was actually the lyrical content. Every song just feels like it was pulled from an angry 15-year-old's journal. Like angry lyrics are all well and good, but like the lyrics don't really have a lot of depth either. It's just like very blunt, in your face, angry guy being angry. I don't know. And like, bear in mind, I've admitted before, I'm not really the kind of guy who analyzes the lyrics really closely unless I've spent a ton of time building a relationship with a song, and I didn't do that with 3 Days Grace here. So take my opinion with a grain of salt, but it all just feels like blunt force, in your face, mad boy energy. There's no clever wordplay. There's no allegory that was immediately apparent to me anyway. Just frank lyrics about fists and car crashes and being stabbed in the heart. I don't know, boys. Listening to the full album wasn't really a fun experience for me. Also, musically, it all just kind of started to sound the same. Like there might be a couple of tracks that stood out more or less, but as a whole album, I think you can skip this. Not a fan. Onto Genesis, A Trick of the Tail. Also a big surprise to me. I didn't actually know that Genesis in their early years was like a prog rock group. I knew Peter Gabriel was their original guy, but I had no idea how kind of like wacky and out there they were. So this was a weird journey for me. The first time I listened through, I was like, what the hell did I just hear? So I did have to revisit it a few times, but it grew on me every time, right? There's a lot of complex song structures and like interesting time signature changes. I would say it's not the most accessible album I've ever heard, but I don't want to sound like I'm pulling a Darren here or anything, but it definitely pairs nicely with some Papaya Cake Indica from Leafly. I would say that, I had to kind of sit there and listen to this album with intention. But when I did do that, I found it quite rewarding. Uh, yeah, kind of a neat album for sure. My biggest unexpected takeaway is that I think the instrumentals on this album are so strong that Phil Collins' voice actually seems like the weak link to me. And I know that's going to sound crazy because Phil Collins is an incredible singer, and that's not to take anything away from him because I've always loved the just the richness, the warmth, the depth that his voice brings to every track I've ever heard him sing on, and that's certainly present on this album too. But I think the instrumentation on this album is just so freaking good that it somehow outshines him. And I don't know if you guys picked up on this or not, but I found his accent was really, really thick on this album too. And it like more than I've ever noticed in any of his solo stuff. I don't know if he, you know, toned it down in subsequent album releases or if he was actually amping it up. Like, what's that one song? I think it was called Robbery, Assault, and Battery. It's super obvious. He's got a very, very thick British accent, English accent. And my most favorite album of the three is The Real Thing by Faith No More. I had only ever heard Epic, and I thought Epic was kind of a cool song, back in the day or whatever. But diving into this album was fun. It was a lot of fun for me. One music journalist called it neo metal, which I thought was quite apt because I think this album is new metal before new metal was called new metal, right? Like it was one of the first times that you really hear hard music with hip hop elements and with funk elements kind of all tied together in a way that is like it just feels cohesive. And sometimes as I'm listening through that, I'm like, how is this album from 1989? It feels a lot more fresh than that. And then Mike Patton starts rapping, and it's like, oh yeah, there it is. There's the 80s shining through. But yeah, I was super impressed by Mike's vocal abilities. He's got a lot of range. He's got a lot of power. His vocal control is amazing. And the rest of the musicians in the band demonstrate their own instrumental proficiencies as well. There were a few standout songs for me. I kept going back to Falling to Pieces. I liked The Real Thing as well. And the War Pigs cover, I mean, I don't like that song in general. I've just survived through way too many bad karaoke renditions of it, but I thought they did a decent job. And actually, I mean, maybe I need to go back and listen to the original side by side, but I did think that they kind of made it their own. So maybe I'm just forgetting what the original sounds like and benchmarking Faith No More's version to the shitty karaoke that I've grown accustomed to. But anyway, what I really like about this album is that every track takes you on a bit of a different journey, a different direction. And this is in stark contrast to my observations with that 3 Days Grace album, where all the songs kind of sounded the same and there was nothing special about any one of them. Faith No More, The Real Thing, really, really hit it out of the park for me. They're a hard rocking band. They have a lot of good hooks. They got great melodies, twists and turns. Like, yeah, I didn't expect to like this album as much as I did, but I'm super glad to have listened to it.
Should we just spit out the common threads first, and then we can maybe go in order with scores?
Yeah, let's do that.
I think I'm going to say what everyone's thinking. I mean, these albums all featured new singers for bands, right? I mean, that was the main thread, and I'm not sure, maybe they all augmented their sound to a certain degree, maybe with surprising success. Those were the only connections I could find. How about the rest of you?
Yeah, I think that, sorry, I'll jump in. Yeah. Like, I think it's quite obvious it was the lead singer switch amongst the three. I don't know if there is any others, and if you found them, that's amazing. They all use guitars. I don't know. Right? But yeah, I would say that's pretty obvious. Scott Gregory, did you see anything else?
Yeah, no, that was it for me. Whenever a singer leaves a band, I always look right, for that. And then I look to see who did better in the long run is the thing for me. People like David Lee Roth leaving Van Halen, Edwin leaving I Mother Earth if you're Canadian, or any of those guys, right? So Peter Gabriel did very well solo. Chuck Mosley went bankrupt and died of a heroin overdose. But Matt Walsh looks like he actually tackled his mental health demons and is still writing and performing, though not nearly as popular as 3 Days Grace. So good for him. If you're struggling with life and addiction, please reach out to someone and start your own road back to.
Yeah, you guys are correct. There was some more nuance to it, though. It wasn't just that these bands all replaced their original singer. They replaced the original singer and continued to make moves within the industry, move the needle in their own way. Going back to the example Scott gave, like I had written down Edwin from I Mother Earth as one of the examples. I think when they replaced Edwin with Brian Byrne, no knocks on Brian Byrne, but the band just never really achieved that level of success after the fact. Alice in Chains, we recently reviewed. They lost their lead singer pretty famously, and it kind of spelled the end of the band, really. I mean, they ended up replacing him with a new guy who does a great job, but by that point, they had kind of lost any momentum they had. Times changed, and same with Sublime. When they lost Bradley, they tried to reform with a dude named Rome, and it didn't go very well. And subsequently, like the band just ceased to exist. So I got the idea for these connections from an Alan Cross blog, where he was talking about all these bands who managed to change their lead singer pretty drastically and still go on to have successful careers. And I think in each of these bands, we've kind of seen that. 3 Days Grace may be the least obvious of the bunch because it was the most recent. But I mean, since Matt Walsh stepped in, that's his name, right? Matt Walsh yeah, I think so. When he stepped in, I mean, since then they've released several albums, I think 2 or 3. Yeah. So good job. I didn't choose a very hard one, I guess. Do we want to get into your overall reviews?
Sure. Yeah. And good picks on these, Alan. I really enjoyed them. 3 Days Grace, I mean, I've given you an overview. I'm just going to give it a 1. Nothing about this sound of bands of this genre and that era sticks out to me. I won't go back to it. Genesis Trick of the Tail, I'll give it a 3 and a 5, 3.5, just because it's just new. Scott Gregory said is, I know Genesis from 1983 onwards, Genesis, and this was, well, I don't love the album. I respect it. I respect what it is. And Faith No More, I definitely liked it more than Darren, I guess. I'm going to give it a 4. And I just, you said it, Alan. I found like every track on that album was so different from the next track, and they really all take you on a neat journey. So a 1, a 3.5, and a 4.
Yeah, I guess I'm up next. And actually, my scores aren't too different from yours. Genesis, and I mean, it's more of a personal thing for me, not my total jam. But I did respect, and you mentioned the instrumentation, and I thought that too. And I read about that they were really, driven to prove that they could still write and produce and play at that high level, because everybody thought Peter Gabriel was the creative genius and the big the big driving force of the band. So when he left, they thought he would fall apart. So it is amazing. So, but that being said, wasn't my jam. I only gave that a 2.5. Faith No More. I mean, I loved it in the day. I just don't think it aged well personally. I'm just giving that a 3 because I still respect it. It was great in its day. And 3 Days Grace, even though I did praise it a little bit and it grew on me, it still wasn't totally my jam, and it is new rock. It is basically kind of a pop music. I would rather that kind of pop music than a lot of like just the overproduced dance crap that's out there. So I actually gave that a 3 as well, because I think for what it is, and I bet you younger people than us, people in their teens, 20s probably love that shit and eat it up. And there are some good songs on there. There's a few good songs on there. So that's where I land. And I agree. It does go better with cannabis. Good Supply has some really good infused cannabis now. They put hash bats and things like that. They're like 30 to 35% THC though. Watch out, a little punchy. What about you, Scott?
Yeah, so Genesis, 2.5 out of 5. Although I was tempted to move up to a 3, you made a pretty good pitch for them as far as this being an album for them proving themselves, right? My knock against it was that it was pretty much the same as, 3 albums in either direction. But when you're doing such a big change with the lead singer, maybe that's not the worst thing in that situation. And then they did eventually find a voice. So somewhere in between there. But none of the tracks really stood out for me, either in context of the album or relation, to the albums around it. Again, as the kids say, it's mid. Faith No More, Real Thing, 4 out of 5. I think it's such a good metal album, and again, I didn't listen to it a lot as a kid, and so it has a little bit of a new car smell to it for me, and that just infuses a number of genres into it that really appealed to me, and I never got bored on the first or subsequent playthroughs, and that has real value for me. 3 Days Grace. So every 3 Days Grace album ever made is a 2 out of 5, except for their debut album, which I'll upgrade to a 2.5. Again, the kids probably really get a kick out of this album. They do have those 17 number one hits. It's not for me. If you're over 40, no. Just say no.
Would you say you hate everything about it?
Nice.
I didn't do that justice, but
yeah. Yes, that was one too many. I'll say one nice thing. Human Race has a semi-interesting guitar solo near the end, and I'll end on a positive note.
Nice. All right. Yeah. Human by 3 Days Grace, I'm giving it 2 out of 5. This is a butt rock album through and through. And if you've never heard of the term butt rock, it's a bit of a pejorative label that's given to this style of like hard rock music that's usually found on radio stations that proudly and loudly proclaim that they only play nothing but rock. And I like a lot of bands that fall into this category. Scott, I'm sorry. I like Nickelback. I don't hate Nickelback. And, you got the Breaking Benjamins and the Shine Downs. Like, these are bands that can wear that butt rock label, but they at least demonstrate some depth and like artistic merit. I have a really tough time finding anything positive to say about 3 Days Grace's album Human. So maybe 2 is even too high. I don't know. Genesis, I am giving a 3 out of 5 for A Trick of the Tail. It's a weird album. It's a weird album, but like Darren said, they set out to, or maybe it was Scott, I can't remember. One of you guys said it was like their first album without Peter Gabriel, and they really wanted to prove that he wasn't the driving force behind this band. So I think that that makes it kind of special, even if it is mid, to Scott's point. And Faith No More, I'm giving a 4.5 out of 5. This one, this blew my mind. I did not expect to like it this much. It sucks that Mosley got the raw deal out of it. I don't remember why they kicked him to the curb. I guess he wasn't so much fired as the band kind of quit and then just reformed without him, which is sort of a dick move, I guess. But there was a lawsuit and there was a settlement. And, c'est la vie. That's how it goes. But, there's a lot of really modern, like influential bands cite this album as being influential on them, which is kind of important, right? Like Nirvana cited this album as being influential. Korn cited this album as influential. Slipknot, like if you're into nu metal, you owe this album a debt of gratitude. And even Robert Plant from Led Zeppelin said this was a great album. So that's a pretty high endorsement, if ever there was one. So 4.5 out of 5 for me.
Sweet.
And I think that wraps up our series of what connects this album.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun. Thanks everyone for your picks. We've done 12 albums in 4 months, so it was a bit of a fun turn. And yeah, I found for this one in particular, I got exposed to just a lot of albums I'd never heard, right? Which was really fun. So thanks for everyone's picks. Darren, you're up with the first pick of 2023.
Yeah, and I mean, we were a little late this month. It was the holidays. Who cares? But yeah, we're usually right up at the, the first or second of the month, and here we are on the 9th. So this episode's probably going up 10th or something like that. So apologies to our listeners that were patiently just waiting by their podcast platform for that issue to drop, or the episode to drop. But yeah, I've gone ahead. It's already up, so no secret. But I picked Pink Floyd. Wish You Were Here, and I basically explained it in a pre-episode, so you can go listen to that. But really, just a band I hadn't really listened to much besides Dark Side of the Moon. I do have another Brick in the Wall on vinyl as well, but I hadn't really gone back, and it's always been a band I meant to. So yeah, I think it'll be a good one with Cannabis as well. And Alan mentioned Alan Cross earlier, and we did do an episode with Alan Cross. I encourage you to go back and listen to that one. Alan Cross is a really famous Canadian rock historian and basically podcaster, news writer, all of it. He does it all. He's really well known in the industry. So interesting guy, and we did an episode with him of what makes a great album. So we got to talk to him. So highly encourage you to go back to listen to that one. So just search for it on your podcast platform. But yeah, excited to listen to Pink Floyd, and that's about it. And thanks again, Alan. That was a really good picks. Thanks for listening and exploring with us. We'll be back real soon with another pick and critique of albums that matter here at the Sonic Collective.